In this section, we will investigate the processes and details of the cascade. In this movie, I define the cascade again, look at a simple way to figure out the cascade, and then begin to look at the real way that the cascade works. As described in a previous movie, the cascade refers to a series of steps that browsers use to determine what styles are applied when there are multiple conflicting rules for the same HTML object. The details of the cascade can get a little bit bogged down, so I have attempted to synthesize a set of simpler rules that more or less works most of the time. Actually, it's not really rules, it's just a set of general guidelines derived from the actual rules that you may find handy. Now, the first guideline is that ID declarations are more powerful than class declarations and will override them. So essentially what this means is if we have a class style set up and it's applied to an HTML object, but at the same time we have an ID that's set up, and for both of those sets of rules they're contributing a different color, well, the ID is going to win because the ID is more specific. The second guideline is the more specific the selector, the more likely that that rule will be applied. Now, there are a couple of different things that we do to check how specific a rule is, and one of those things is how unique is it? That's really one of the underlying guidelines and principles about a lot of the cascade. How specific is our rule? And by specific, we mean how uniquely does it identify the item that it's targeting. And that actually goes back to that first guideline with the ID declaration, because generally you can't get more specific than the ID declaration. However, we might actually see that you can. But anyway, the third guideline is that explicitly declared styles will always override implicitly inherited styles. So again, that kind of mentions this more specific idea. So if we have an explicitly declared style, well, it's always going to override an inherited style because that explicitly declared style is more specific. And the last guideline here is that the last declared or closest to the content will be applied. And so that essentially means what it says, in that if we have a style that was declared last and there's a conflict between that and a previous style, the last style will indeed win. Now, these are general guidelines that are typically enough to figure out what's going on in the cascade a great deal of the time. But it's still a good idea to know the actual way the cascade is performed. The cascade is performed in these steps. The first step is it's going to catalog all of the rules. The second step is it's going to consider the weight and origin of the rule. The third step is it's going to calculate how specific a rule is. The fourth step is it's going to determine placement. Of course, we're going to go more in depth with each one of these steps in the next couple of movies, but it's through this multi-tiered approach that all of our conflicts are resolved. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the first step in this movie. So we're looking at cataloging all the rules. What exactly does that mean? Well, it means essentially that the browser is going to go through our document and locate the various rules that apply to that document. So essentially, all it's really doing is it's just reading all the rules. Now, according to specifications, the browser will actually read the styles in a specific order. So that order will be browser styles, user styles, author styles, author embedded, and author inline. So let's go ahead and let's break that down a little bit more. So our browser styles, these control the default appearance of all HTML elements, and these are set by the browser developers. So if you notice, whenever you just pull up a plain HTML document with no style information in it, you will see how your browser is rendering, say, the paragraph tag or the H1 tag. And then if you pull it up in a different browser, you'll notice how it's doing it over there. And you may end up seeing some slight differences. And that's because your browsers are applying a browser style sheet to your actual documents. Now, it is possible for you to get in there and kind of monkey around with these browser styles. However, that's typically not going to be that great of a thing to do because it can totally change the way that things appear. So just be aware of that, that you can change it, but you probably don't want to. And in fact, most users don't even know that they can change that, but you can if you really, really want to. Now, the second place that it reads these rules from is your user styles. Now, these are any rules that the end user might have set to personalize their browsing experience. Different browsers have different methods of how this is done, including just using some of your accessibility options and some of your settings and some of your menus, whereas other browsers will allow you to actually define a user style sheet and place it in a specific location, and it will read those rules. However, most users are unaware of how to do this, but if you're interested in finding out how to do that, I suggest a quick internet search to produce a number of fruitful pathways that you might want to investigate. The third location that it's going to read the rules from is any author style sheet. Now, this is talking about any external style sheet, either linked or imported. Then it's going to read any embedded style sheets that you might have set up internal to the HTML document. And then lastly, it's going to read the styles that were defined in line. Essentially what your browser is doing once it loads up those browser and the user styles is it reads the HTML document from the top to the bottom, and this is the order that you'll typically set up any of your rules anyway. So you'll set up your style sheet link first, then you'll set up your style section, then you'll do your inline style. Now, once the browser has cataloged all of these rules, it will determine if there are conflicts. Then the cascade moves on to step 2.